During the Second World War, both the Axis and Allies were competing to be the winner, which required both manpower and technological innovation. Because of this, numerous breakthroughs were made during the war in the field of science that would shape the world in tremendous ways that we are still seeing today. With the creation and development of many new and emerging technologies, such as nuclear weapons, the advancement of radar, and jets, came many teething pains in the early stages. Of these early struggles, some of the most pronounced came in the form of early jet aircraft, notably the Ryan FR Fireball. The Fireball was a mixed propulsion fighter, meaning that it had both piston and jet power, as it was a naval fighter, and jet power was both not reliable enough nor powerful enough at this stage in its development to be able to take off from a short carrier deck without the assistance of a piston engine. Largely due to this odd combination being conceived due to the newness of jet technology, especially in relation to carrier takeoffs, the aptly named Ryan FR Fireball was not long for this world, only seeing service for about 2 years without ever seeing combat, and only having around 70 produced. Though of course, this short service life was not expected, and rather occurred due to a myriad of factors in the Fireball's design that led to its extremely early, though welcomed, demise. The life of the doomed Fireball started in earnest in 1943, with the design requiring a mixed propulsion combined power plant, as it was known that jets in development at the time were too sluggish to be used for carrier operations. Throughout 1943, the Fireball was worked on, with a call for 3 prototypes to be produced by April of 1944. In the meantime, the US Navy placed an order for 100 Ryan Fireballs in December of 1943, which indicated both interest in the program and faith in Ryan's ongoing design. During this time, Ryan opted to use the Wright R1820 Cyclone radial engine, which produced up to 1,350 horsepower in the variant that it was, as well as the J31 centrifugal jet engine, which was also used on the limited production Bell P-59 Aerocomet. It was also decided to use 4 Browning M250 caliber machine guns with 300 rounds each as an offensive armament, though it also had the ability to carry 2,000 pounds of bombs as well as numerous HFAR rockets. After the initial designs were finalized, a prototype was ready for flight and first took off in late June of 1944, though only with the propeller engine equipped. Shortly thereafter, however, the planned jet was installed in the tail in order to continue testing. These initial test flights illuminated several stability issues that were corrected by making the vertical stabilizer larger. These corrections, however, did not make it into the first dozen or so production models, and the fixes were only partially retrofitted on affected aircraft. These stability issues would be the harbinger of many more issues to come, especially during testing and carrier operations. In October of 1944, the first prototype was lost in a crash that was found to be caused by structural weakness once compressibility was beginning to impact the plane's performance at higher speed. The second prototype crashed several months later in March of 1945, due again to suspected compressibility, after it dived from 35,000 feet. Coincidentally, March 1945 also marked the introduction of the aptly named Fireball into service with the US Navy, even despite these issues. The third prototype crashed only weeks later in early April of 1945, when the canopy ripped off during flight. Additional testing revealed piston engine overheating issues that were largely solved by adding electronic cowling controls, as well as issues with the design that made it difficult to use on carriers that were also fixed, such as with the arrestor hook. Though initial carrier tests while these fixes were being implemented showed that the Fireball may indeed be suitable for service on these ships, actual operation proved otherwise. Regardless, the US Navy was happy enough with the results thus far that they increased orders to over 1,000 Fireballs in total, contingent on further completing carrier suitability trials. As mentioned before, during these carrier trials and initial tests, the Fireball was officially accepted into service and began deliveries to operational squadrons in March of 1945, being first delivered to VF-66. Of the 3 Fireballs that were used to qualify pilots aboard the USS Ranger, 2 crashed and were destroyed, though the pilots eventually qualified. These qualifications, however, came too little and too late, as none of the Fireballs saw combat during World War II, despite being operational. Similar to how the P-80 Shooting Stars were stationed in Italy, but likely never saw combat use, barring a few anecdotal stories that they chased AR-234s. Regardless, because of the slow deployment and development of the Ryan FR Fireball, as well as the end of World War II and the rapid development of of jet technology, the US Navy canceled their orders of the Fireball as they began to see it as a dead end and a dangerous aircraft to handle aboard carriers. Interestingly though, opposite of this point was the fact that the Fireball had a backup power plant in case one of the two failed, which happened in November of 1945 when the piston engine failed, forcing the Fireball to land under jet power alone, making it the first aircraft to land on a carrier using jet power only, although of course it was not intentional. After this incident and through 1946 and 47, the US Navy went ahead with trying to qualify pilots on the already out of production Fireballs, with many of these aircraft having collapsing nose wheels and other issues when landing on carriers, which not only took these Fireballs out of immediate service, but also meant that a relatively small number of pilots actually qualified on them. Even once the nose wheel issues were corrected, other issues continue to pop up, including structurally weak wings that would potentially snap when taking turns over 5 Gs, which led to the deaths of numerous pilots. Because of these wing breakage incidents, as well as other structural issues, including a Fireball literally splitting in two when landing on a carrier, the type was finally withdrawn from service in mid-1947, hardly 2.5 years after being accepted initially into service. Though it was determined fairly early to be of suspect quality, with mounting evidence as time went on, there were still enough proponents of the Fireball that, during its testing phase as well as throughout its service life, several improvements were made in an attempt to make it a feasible, long-term solution for the US Navy. For example, during testing, the XFR-2 was developed that saw a variant of the Cyclone piston engine replace the one that was designated for production, which increased its horsepower by about 75. Another variant, the XFR-4, saw the use of the Westinghouse J34 axial flow turbojet engine in place of the centrifugal J31, which gave it nearly a 2 times increase in thrust produced by the jet alone, and resulted in about a 100 mph increase in top speed from around 400 mph to just about 500. Perhaps the most notable and radical change, however, would be the creation of the XF2R Dark Shark, which was essentially a lengthened version of the Fireball with a turboprop engine in lieu of the Cyclone engine fitted into production models. The Dark Shark would have featured the same armament, and despite having a nearly 500 mph top speed and enough design changes to fix many of the issues with the Fireball, it ended up weighing even less than its predecessor and was still not chosen to be produced, largely for the same reasons why the Fireball had such a short life: rapidly developing technologies that made these planes obsolete functionally within months of being created. Though the Fireball had more faults than the Dark Shark, namely in its structural soundness, they both ended up relegated to the dustbin of history, marking the pivot point between piston and jet-powered flight. Though they both ultimately failed, the Fireball was still produced and is still considered to be the US Navy's first jet-powered aircraft, even if it wasn't solely powered in that way. It is an important reminder that emerging technologies can provide a tremendous advantage in war, but may also provide great dangers to the initial pilots that use them in service, as they were essentially test pilots, not only testing a new aircraft, but totally new and emergent technologies in the difficult conditions faced in the open ocean of an aircraft carrier. With that said, thank you all so much for watching. I greatly appreciate every view, and if you guys want, check out my other history videos. Either way, see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.